On behalf of India Foundation, I welcome you all for a panel discussion. Today, we are going to discuss a very important topic, which is regime change in Syria and its regional repercussions. This event has been organized by India Foundation in collaboration with India Habitat Center. To discuss this topic of great relevance, we have eminent speakers with us, whom I would like to invite to the stage. May I request Dr. Meena Singh Roy, Ambassadors Ausaf Sayeed and Dr. Waiel Awwad to kindly come to the stage. I also request Captain Alok Bansal, Director of India Foundation, to kindly come to the dais. May I request Captain Alok Bansal to kindly carry forward the proceedings. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Waiel Awwad is en route and he'll be able to join us in a few minutes. Today, what we are going to discuss is regime change in Syria. While Indian media often covers certain topics in great detail, this is one of the issues that has not really been covered adequately. While it has an enormous impact, we have a former Al-Qaeda man, suited, booted, lording over a country, and the West is going gaga over him. We are seeing an issue of national reconciliation. So we have a big development which will have an impact on the entire Middle East. And to say it will have an impact only on Middle East would be an understatement actually. It has a global impact. When Russia intervened in Syria and ensured Bashar al-Assad's staying, Putin brought Russia back to the global stage. From a Russia which after the disintegration of Soviet Union had been confined only to the CIS, had again shown to the world that it has emerged as a global power. But the manner in which Ahmad al-Shara and his forces captured Damascus also showed that Russia did not have the capacity to intervene thereafter. So it shows when people talk of Russia-Ukraine war and its impact, it also shows that it has had an impact even there. We are talking of national reconciliation. People are gaga that democracy has returned. I'm not very sure if the democracy has really returned. You have somebody heading a government without any legitimacy. He's starting with national reconciliation. You have seen women being tormented. Religious minorities are still living a little scared. But of course, he has invited them all for national reconciliation. You saw the Orthodox Archbishop has been invited. So has the opposition leader been invited. But the bigger question is what happens to the Kurds? The YPF holding on to a territory. Americans in any case had betrayed them earlier. And now under Trump, you don't know what's going to happen. You have seen what happened today on a resolution in United Nations on Russia-Ukraine war. Both US and Russia opposed the resolution which was put forward by all other G7 members. And India and China were together in abstaining. So we have new permutations and combinations that are emerging in the global arena. And Syria definitely has a major role to play. Now to speak on this particular subject, I think we couldn't have had a better person than Ambassador Ausaf Sayeed, who's been our ambassador to Saudi Arabia. He has spent 10 years in Saudi Arabia in different capacities. He's actually one single man institution who knows the most about this particular area. So without wasting much time, I'll request him to kindly ponder over the subject for 10 to 15 minutes. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Bansal, firstly for an India Foundation for having invited me and distinguished panelists and the audience. This is a subject which all over the world people are actually following what is happening in the Middle East. In fact, Middle East is a kind of a region which is perpetually under some kind of a tension or conflict, and we have been seeing this, since decades, and if not more. Now, but the collapse of Bashar al-Assad's regime in December 2024 was so sudden, and after almost 54 years of Assad's family rule, that nobody perhaps would have anticipated it would happen that fast, and it would happen in this manner. And now everybody were thinking that it is infallible. You have Russia on one side and Iran on other side. But one thing's happened when we started seeing that HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, of course, a Sunni rebel group with Al-Qaeda leanings and Al-Wahhabi ideology, Salafist ideology, when they started moving to cities like Aleppo and others and reached Damascus, Iran was nowhere to be seen, Russia was nowhere to be seen. Each perhaps within they're preoccupied with their own issues. Russia with Ukraine, and Iran severely kind of bogged down with conflict with Israel and his own internal issues. But then also the fatigue level which had set in Assad's army itself. I think the army was plagued with desertions and targeted strikes by Israel, and all that led to a very swift change in government in Syria. And then once that happened, then we saw that Syria was kind of left with three major conflict zones, or three major zones. One is the HTS controlled central and northern regions backed by Turkey. Another, of course, the northeast region, which is Kurdish held, supported by US but opposed by Ankara. And then small pockets still remain of Alawite loyalists who are kind of waiting and watching to see. Now, what were the implications of this sudden change is something which we need to see. First and foremost was obvious that it has considerably weakened the axis of resistance of Iran, because it gave a major blow to Hezbollah, because Syria was serving as a gateway or a land bridge for supply of material and ammunition, weapons, whatever, to Hezbollah in Lebanon. So with Assad gone, now Iran is kind of in isolation, must now calibrate its strategy, how it can kind of could it still leverage that strategy of proxies against the Israel, because again, that again in Gaza, the Hamas is, in no more in a position to kind of play the role which Iran would have wanted. Then again in Yemen, another place where they served. The Houthis, of course, on and off, they do create a nuisance, but I don't think they are in a position to really play that role. So Iran is in a very most defensive position right now, and more so after after Trump became the president, because they don't know what exactly is going to happen. So there is Hezbollah's decline, the axis of resistance gone. So there is internal pressure in Iran for leadership change and so many things. So this is one factor that Iran is out of it, at least for some time to come. Now, who is the biggest gainer in this? I would perhaps say that Turkey is the biggest gainer. It has emerged as a primary power broker, and perhaps it has replaced Russia as a main negotiator in Syria, because now it has facilitated, although publicly they denied, it has backed up the HTS for taking over Syria. Now, their main issue in Syria right now is that they have to take care of about 3.6 million refugees who are in Syria. And then how they can push them back to Syria. This is a big political issue in Turkey. It is last elections, there were a certain promises made by Erdogan that the people, the opinion polls, they said they wanted the Syrian refugees back. They want a security in the border area. Turkey shares 911 kilometers of border with Syria. So then actually this is one thing which they would like to prevent any kind of Kurdish nationalism from spilling over in Turkey, even if it means taking military action against the Kurdish forces in the northeast of Syria. There is also a possibility which people are talking about that despite unease with al-Shara, Turkey would perhaps like to negotiate a defense pact with Syria, so that they could allow Turkey to establish some air bases and all, and provide training to Syria to maintain some kind of a military role in there. Now, the other country which has been affected by this change is Israel. Of course, they were perplexed and surprised at the changes. One is that a stable Syria is in the interest of Israel, So, but then at the same time, they don't want any spillover action of hardliners, ex-hardliners, to kind of create foment trouble for them in the southern part. So they have started taking several coercive measures. You are aware that they occupied the demilitarized buffer zone in the Golan Heights, which was established in 74. The army also took control of a mountain called Mount Hermon, which is Jabal Sheikh. And Israel has been now demanding that there is complete demilitarization of the southern Libya. They don't want neither the HTS nor any other form of Syrian forces there. So this is one thing. But at the same time, Israel is also looking at a post-Assad situation where HTS has said that it wants to normalize relations with Israel. So this is also one factor. After a long time, we see kind of a ray of hope that these two adversaries could perhaps start working together. Russia, as I said in the beginning, they have a very diminished role right now. Their immediate priority for Kremlin right now is to kind of do damage control. They want to negotiate with HTS and other Kurdish groups just to safeguard their assets, whatever bases they have. If they are not kind of pushed to vacate those, this is something which is there. But then they are no longer in that position to actively direct events there. Now, other biggest gainers, I would say, is the Gulf states, particularly Saudi Arabia. Because earlier, the stance when Assad was there, primarily Saudi Arabia's stance was there not to insist on a regime change in Syria. So let the guy be there, but then let him not be, under the lap of Iran to create a nuisance. You say that they used to tell them, after all, you are an Arab. So, we would not insist on changing you, but at the same time, you should not do anything which affects the Arab world's interest. That used to be the thing. But with this sudden change, now both Saudi Arabia and Qatar have become very active in Syria. One thing is common between them. All of them have the Salafist ideology. So suddenly you have seen Alawite minority state, which was in the laps of Iran, suddenly spring back into a Sunni thing. So you have Saudi Arabia. The first country which Al-Shara visited was Saudi Arabia. Perhaps the first head of state who visited Syria in the new Syria was the Amir of Qatar. And then we had the foreign ministers and others, and of course, so all this thing is there. So this situation has changed now. Both these countries are realizing that you have a Sunni Syrian new regime which is there. So they would like this regime to continue. And but then there are certain conditions which have been said, inclusivity, that they would like Al-Shara to kind of take cognizance of the various factions which are there in Syria, and then take them along. Then good governance, democracy, and these are the things, of course, now even Saudis are talking about. We would never have expected these things before, but then this is the new mantra which is there. So of course, Mr. Alok also mentioned that he is carrying out overtures to various people. In fact, he has promised military reunification, in fact disbanding all rebel faction, including his own. He said all of them should come under merit-based military. There are security reforms he's talking about. He has disbanded the Baath party. Then he is talking about creating a temporary legislative council. As we speak, the National Dialogue Conference has already started. And then the effort of both Saudi and Qatar in the current point of time is to somehow work with international community to lift the sanctions in Syria, because it is extremely important to lift the sanctions in Syria, because the pre-war population of Syria was around 23 million, but they say that out of this 23 million, 13 million have been displaced, either internally or into various countries, surrounding countries, including in Turkey, where about 3.6 million is there. So they would like the US sanctions, which was imposed under the Syrian Civil Protection Act, the most severe sanctions which were there in the first Trump administration. The Europeans are keen to review these sanctions and suspend sanctions on things like energy, transport, reconstruction, but not on financial transactions. Whereas Syria is very keen that all sanctions should go. The main reason is that the conflict of 14 years has shrunk the Syrian economy by almost 84%, and 90% of the population of Syria is into poverty. This is as per the UN reports, and they say that, for instance, the World Bank says that between 2011 and 2023, the value of Syrian pound has dropped from 47 pounds to $1 to 12,500 Syrian pounds to $1. So you can just imagine there's no economy as such which is there. And the government revenues, because primarily they used to depend on the oil revenue. So 1/4 of the Syrian territory is under the Kurdish-dominated SDF. So the oil revenue has also fallen from 20% to about 4%. So this is again something which is important, that these sanctions are lifted. Then the Syria is also banking on renewed tourism. You would have heard that the Qatar Airways and Turkish Airlines are deciding to open up and open services there. There are private airlines which are thinking of again starting services. So basically earlier, again, one of the main revenue earners for Syria was the tourism. So this is something which is again thought of. Now you see, we don't know about Biden, we don't know about Trump, but the Biden had started engaging with Syria. Trump had said that Syria is not our ally, so we would kind of observe it from outside and not play a direct role. But having said that, there are indications that Trump would not oppose partial lifting of sanctions, but of course again backed with several conditions which are there. Coming back to Saudi Arabia, I would say that traditionally we have always been hearing about a cold war between Saudi and Iran, this Shia-Sunni kind of a conflict. But one another conflict, or one another rivalry, I would say, rather than conflict, was within the Sunnis. You see, Turkey is a majority Sunni country. Saudi Arabia is a Sunni country. Saudi Arabia holds this title of custodian of the two holy mosques, Khadim al-Harmain al-Sharifain. Now, this gives them a kind of undeclared authority over the entire issues of Muslim Islamic Ummah all over the world. That's what they claim. Now, if you go back in history, this title was also held by the Ottomans, the Turks, and before them also by the Ayyubids and all that. So there was a time when Saudi Arabia used to say that, okay, Iran, we have been dealing with Iran for a long time, so we know how to deal with this. But this country is a problem because we don't know how to deal with them. Because this is where, and if you recollect that a couple of years ago, there was a conference in Malaysia which was supported by Pakistan and all, where they were actually talking about an alternate Islamic kind of formulation, which they didn't like very much. And so from our perspective, we have said that we still regard Saudi Arabia as the kind of authentic or legal representative of that. So when I mentioned to you about Al-Shara's diplomatic efforts and all that, now the major goal of diplomatic efforts of Shara was to rebuild alliances with the Arab world, securing financial support for reconstruction, and gaining recognition from the Western powers to ease the sanctions. So this is something was there. But then again, when we talk of reconstruction, it is kind of not a easy thing to think about, because reconstruction itself will cost a lot of money. They are talking about something in the range of $250 to $400 billion required for reconstruction, and this reconstruction will take several decades. At least 10 to 20 years of dedicated efforts if there is nothing happens and all these countries are there. And then, of course, it's important that the assets of Syria which are there are unfrozen. Unfortunately, of course, it is expected, or it is known that Bashar al-Assad and his family had smuggled out lot of the government funds to the tune of at least 130 to 140 billion dollars. So all that apart, so the whole thing has made Syria into a very complicated country. Now we know that HTS leadership has, ex-Al-Qaeda leadership has said that they want to include people, and then we had some Jew rabbis had gone there and started visiting the synagogues and other thing. But one thing never to be forgotten is that they're ex-Al-Qaeda. What will happen to those more than 40,000, 50,000 militias which are there? So we are looking at a possibility of the country going more hardline. We are looking one possibility. Another possibility is that the whole mainstream of the world supports. So, but nevertheless, all said and done, it's a very, very important country, very important region, and it is in everyone's interest to support Syria at this juncture and do not allow it to fall into the kind of state which was there. I'll stop here, and later, whenever there are questions, I'll say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Sayeed. I think it was fascinating. There are many imponderables when we look at Syria. While one could understand why Russia could not intervene in Syria when Damascus fell, it's still not very clear as to why Iran did not intervene, despite knowing how critical Syria was for its continued influence in that part of the world. HTS is nothing but an old offshoot of Al-Qaeda, Al-Shams, Nusra al-Shams. Nusra al-Shams had connections with Israel. So when Al-Shara says that we want to cooperate, it's not that something which is new which has emerged. I remember during one of my visits to Israel, the Israelis were providing medical support to Nusra al-Shams. So that's a fact. So there are complexities which are there. Turkey undoubtedly has gained. When he talks about unity of arms, well, his faction coming under it is not a problem because he'll be dominating it. What about the Kurds? Will they surrender their arms? What about the Druze? Because all said and done, the HTS ideology, despite his overtures, does not inspire confidence in other minorities, Kurds, Druze, for that matter, Alawites, of course, who have been receiving. There are numerous strands of Christianity and Islam other than Alawites and Sunnis which are present in Syria, and all of them have concerns. The fact is, his overtures, his actions have been very broad-minded. His national reconciliation dialogue is going on. He's now dressed in suits. But we can see that there seems to be a trend. In Afghanistan also, Taliban, when they were in Doha, they made all sorts of overtures. They were talking all good things. We will include women, we'll allow them to work, we'll do that, we'll have an inclusive government. And as they kept consolidating, their stance kept hardening. Now, is it a tactical ploy which all radical Islamists have employed, where they want to talk nice when they are in a weak position so that they are not dislodged? And once they strengthen, they became more hardened. So this is a question which one will have to ask. I'll now request Dr. Meena Singh Roy to talk for 10 to 15 minutes.
Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you so much for, and thank you so much for giving this opportunity to share, my views on the most complex region and even difficult country like Syria. I think much has been said about the reasons as to why, this sudden surprise happened. But I think there was some planning as well, which was going on. But the timing was, I think, very, very crucial when we look at this. Now, having heard what Ambassador Ausaf had to say, I'll try and raise few questions and see if I can add something to what has already been said. But if we look at the whole region, we cannot de-link Syria from the larger, I call it a greater West Asia, because when we look at the region from here, we either call it Havana region, but the Gulf is different. So when we say greater West Asia, we are looking at not only Middle East as it is seen from the West, but we are also, we can't disconnect it for the larger space called Eurasia. So I think when we look at it, there's a paradigm shift today in the larger West Asian region today. I would say, there's an emergence of new West Asia regionally, nationally, as well as its linkages with the broader international community today, because of one unique feature, I think, which we have seen in the West Asian region, is the impact of the external actors. And I think the uniqueness has been that the region has invited the external actors to intervene, and I think that is the key to it. There are so many problems, but when we talk about the regime change in Syria, it is the reality. The reality is also that the gentleman who's sitting, Julani or Harara, whatever we want to call him, but end of the day, he was a terrorist. He was a declared terrorist. There was a major, amount put on his head. And suddenly, we see him in a new avatar, which has been talked about. But how far his credibility will go on in times to come, I think, is the question to ponder. Now, the European Union, the Americans, the West, and even, the Arab partners have approved what he is doing, are supporting him for their interest. It is the greater geopolitics which is being played, and there are also elements of geoeconomics that we see out there in the region today. So I think the time will only tell us as to what kind of an realliances or the power play of these regional and international actors is going to bring about the changes. But my hunch is this was an appropriate time. And I think one important, event which really changed the whole Middle Eastern geopolitics was October 7. And thereafter, a lot of things can be linked to what is happening, whether we talk about the Gaza plan, how it will work out, what are the Israeli stakes and interest, what are the regional actors wanting to achieve, and let's not forget the external actors. As I go along, I think the political transition, which is still shaping up, there are many challenges, despite the fact, what is happening today. The national conference which is happening, but the challenges are too serious. If we look at regional power dynamics, yes, I think you said, and sir, you also said that Turkey is the gainer. Israel is playing a very different game today. Even today, I think Israel is playing a very, very different game. I think you said stability in Syria helps them, but I think the weak Syria is in the interest of Israel. That is what is the Israeli perception. And I think the strikes which happened immediately after, the change, the regime change in Syria, we saw how Israel acted, and which had a full green signal by the Americans there. So I think despite the fact that the Israelis, the Americans, Turkey have been, beneficiary of what change has taken place in Syria, but at the same time, the Israeli perspective at this point in time is very different. They haven't won the war in Gaza. Even after, I would say, ceasefire, you see the Hamas, people with the rifles, they have not been de-armed, So the demilitarization, de-radicalization is something which will be a key to, as far as the Syrians are concerned, as far as the Israelis are concerned. As far as the Turkey is concerned, I think Turkey has benefited, but I also foresee China, clubbing with Turkey. And I do see a triangle of China, Turkey, and Syria, because Syria needs more investments. Temporarily, those sanctions have been removed by the European Union. That is more to do with, I think, the refugee crisis in Europe, and Europe is still struggling today, because the way Mr. Trump has said, you look after your defense, you have to invest more in your own security. And the economies of even the European Union is not doing so well. How much is going to come from the European Union? I think they are going to buy peace in a sense that they want to handle the refugee crisis, and therefore they are willing to pay the price for it, which will solve the problem back home. So those are the things. As far as China is concerned, I think it's been the loser, and maybe in the long run it would gain few things. And I think I see Chinese interest when we talk about the BRI. Syria becomes a very important, Turkey becomes a very important part of it. So I would see, China coming through Turkey in Syria when it comes to their economic diplomacy that they are talking about. Maybe in months to come, how it works out from them, but I don't rule out the triangle of Turkey, China, and Syria at one level. And Mr. Julani, who's in suits and ties, but I don't know how much he's changed. Do we see some kind of a model which we saw in Tajikistan, where the opposition was made part of the regime, and later on, I think they were neutralized gradually? Now, something like this is going to happen in Syria? I have no idea. I think there are more uncertainties when we are looking at Syria than the developments that we're seeing. But the only change we see here in case of Syria is Iran is weakened, Russia is weakened, but Mr. Putin has spoken to al-Shara, and he has also invited the foreign minister to Moscow. So what kind of a dynamics is going to be played out, we really don't know. But I think at present, the HTS is going to follow the multi-victor foreign policy. They want to please their Arab partners because the money is going to come from there. They're also wanting to please the Europeans. It's a very highly Eurocentric region also, despite the fact that, why is it the refugees don't go to the Middle East, to the Gulf countries? This is simply because everybody sees future in Europe. And I think that is what is the question we need to debate. So if we have to see the regional implications of this, then I would say, there is shift in the balance of power today. The Arab Gulf country is much stronger. We see the Saudis, the UAE, the Qataris, they have, and they would be probably going. Egypt is probably going to be more involved when it comes to Gaza. But I think the role of these Arab partners is also going to be very, very important. Let us see, how this is going to actually probably influence the rest of the region and the global players as such. I would say that, the most challenging part of the whole unfolding situation is what you also highlighted about the rise of these extremist groups. By changing their clothes, do they change their mind? I think ideology is something which is a very, very crucial aspect of it, and how it is going to take its shape, we really don't know. But reconciliation, the dialogue, and this 4 years of building of new constitution, I'm little skeptical about it, despite the fact that the West and the US is very, very enthusiastic about. The US doesn't want to take much interest in it. But at the same time, you look at the education pattern, the changes which, the education minister has already started in terms of the syllabus which is there. What is the role? The women who are going to the educational institutions, they are covered from top to bottom. Now, what is the kind of system that will really unfold in years to come has to be seen. So that is the really important aspect. But we do see HTS and Mr. Sharara Al Sharara actually, being able to convince, even if it is for the short time, that look, I have changed a lot. I'm a nationalist. I'm going to work for the people of Syria. I have de-linked myself with the extremist forces. But how much money will flow into Syria, we will have to wait and see. And I'm getting a signal from here that I need to stop here, and maybe later on we can talk about it during the Q&A session.
Thank you, Meena. When we look at Syria, there are ponderables and imponderables. Everybody knows Turkey has gained. Everybody knows that Iran and Russia have weakened. What has happened to Israel? Still a question mark, but obviously it has gained quite a bit. But there are other imponderables. What happens to Iraq? A Shia majority state which was not directly linked with it. How is its connection? What happens? What has been the Western role? That's big question mark. The Western world, which is actually going gaga over a transformed terrorist, we need to know that very well. Until now, we have had Indians talk about Syria. Now we'll have a Syrian talk about Syria. So now I'll have Waiel Awwad, who's actually a Syrian journalist who has been in India for decades. And I think who knows Syria better than any of us to answer these questions that I have, which probably others also must be thinking about. Over to you.
Thank you very much for the humble comments you made. Good afternoon, everybody. My first apology for being late, which has never been my habit, but because of the traffic now in Delhi, it's impossible. But that also reminds me of an Indian magician when we were waiting for him for 2 hours. And he's late, and we got frustrated, and suddenly he jumped into the stage and he said, "Oh, I hope I'm not late." Then we all looked at the time. It was correctly the same time he promised us. So I'm not a magician, nor a politician, but I'm going to speak as a Syrian who lives in India, who enjoyed being in India for decades. Yes, it's my home. I'm Indian by naturalization, but Syrian by birth. So I am happy to be among the most distinguished people, and I can recognize many of the faces, and that makes me proud of being invited by the foundation again, which has been a long history with Captain Alok and the President. Thank you very much. It's difficult to speak about your country if I'm in my country currently, because I am known, when I was covering Afghanistan, I got a call from the Al-Qaeda leader, and it was after the fall of Taliban. He said, if they know what you are talking in Arabic, you will be executed. So luckily, they didn't know the Arabic language you are speaking. So I am now facing a problem that many people will be able to listen and record my voice and send it across. But nevertheless, I think I'll live my rest of my life in India. Because Syria is a story, everybody knows it is Syria. And I'm a Syrian, Suri. Syria is the sun, is the Sanskrit word. So when the sun rises from the east, it will always rise from the east. So Syria will never die. We may have regime change. The policy has been on for long years. We are part of the Arab world. We are part of the Sykes-Picot division of 100 years ago, where the Arab world has been divided and the Ottoman Empire was removed. The colonial Ottoman was removed, and they promised us independence, but never the independence happened. We were divided into 19 countries, and then after that, they occupied us at the Second World War. And most of the leaders post-Second World War, most of them actually have come on the tanks of the winners of the Second World War. So we never had established a full democracy as some of the countries enjoy, like India have done. So I think what we have been facing is that the creation of the State of Israel in the heart of Palestine was one of the main causes for keeping this Arab world divided. It's not a question of a conspiracy theory, nor I'm going to speak an anti-Semite or I'm going to speak an anti-American, but I'm trying to be more realistic and putting on records, and many of you knows that some of the spoken word from the distinguished speakers is already touched many of the issues, which is actually the American now acknowledged, and they will tell you that they have intervened 5 times in Syria to topple the regimes. They have intervened in Iran. They have intervened anywhere in the world. There is no question of upholding or promising democracy in the Arab world. That's only just a way of saying, because at the end of the day, it is the interest. Where goes the interest? They go. They don't care. our Kurdish friend has been, victimized throughout history from the Russian till date. So then nothing's changed in the history actually. It's continued the same suffering. My point here is because of my country, Syria. I mean, in fact, when we got independent and we had lots of coup happening in Syria, many coups took place till the Ba'ath party has come and the Ba'ath party took Syria over and they become one party ruling. And of course, it was a military security apparatus party, no doubt about it, everybody knows. But that's how they retain power in Syria. And that's how they maintain their presence in the country. And they had, throughout the years, we didn't see much of a coup or a destabilization. But I ask people, why Syria? I mean, the question comes, why Syria? Why Syria has to be targeted? It's part of in the heart of the Arab countries. It's part of the big power games because it's the end of the Silk Route where we're meeting East and West. And also you will have, it's a secular. We don't have debt to the IMF. We don't have debt to the World Bank. So if you don't have debt to the World Bank or the IMF, of course you are a target for it. Secondly, or maybe more importantly, we're next to Israel. So being next to Israel, and Israel themselves, Ben Gurion said it himself, the state of Israel's supremacy and survival in the region depend on removing of three countries, Iraq, Syria, and Egypt. Iraq started the war when the revolution in Iran took place. Immediately Saddam Hussein was funded, armed with the chemical weapons, with all the weapons of the Western world to topple or to fight the Iranian regime. At the same time, there was the jihadist culture in Afghanistan. Started at the same time, parallel, one a Shia, one a Sunni, to counter each other. So they wanted to bring for us something called the New Islam. New Islam in the region. How the New Islam is seen from the eyes of the American and Brzezinski, who was the National Security Advisor of the United States, who went with the weapons to Afghanistan, and it's all in YouTube, and he said, the Messiah of God came to save you. He was a fighter with the Taliban, with the Al-Qaeda forces. Bin Laden was with them. And I have shown many pictures of these issues that when Bin Laden was a veteran, he was in the front pages of the American newspaper as a fighter against the USSR. But then when they changed guard, then we said, as the Indian Prime Minister said, good terrorist and bad terrorist comes in the picture. So he became a bad terrorist that time when he fought against the American. So therefore, the introductions of a new Islam into the Arab world was part of the regime change policy. We must accept this idea. When our people of the different part of the world, most of the mullahs and the sheikhs and the imams from all over the world were speaking on speakers and telling people to go and for jihad in Afghanistan, many of our people joined, many of them, including some of the people who've been released from jails, different jails of the Arab world, and pushed into Afghanistan to fight. And at the end of the day, the Arab Al-Qaeda moved into Morocco, moved into Yemen, moved into Iraq, and the American went into unilaterally into exceptionally occupying Iraq, and they started the seditions and the retribution between the Sunni Shia factors. And Bremer's, in fact, everybody remember, I was embedded with the American journalists, American troops as a journalist, and I was captured with the Iraqi regime. But anyway, I managed to escape. But that's not the issue. The issue is that most of the leaders of the Daesh, 19 leaders of Daesh were in American jail in Iraq, including Abu Muhammad Julani. Julani spent 5 years inside the jail of Iraq. When we confronted the American, why you release Baghdadi, though you had 10 million bounty on his head? Well, the only answer, they said, mixed identity. So they mixed identity, it was in the jail. And I have shown many of the atrocities they have done. So basically, most of the terrorist organization created in Iraq shifted their gear into Syria. Because Al-Qaeda formed in Iraq and Golani got the brigades or upgraded to Amir because he has more than 20,000 Iraqi on his hand, he killed. So that's how they promote the person. So he became Amir. He went to Syria. He changed gear from Al-Qaeda because he wanted to have a Tahrir al-Sham, Jabhat al-Nusra, where he started. Then he had Tahrir al-Sham, where he had many of the groups under his arms. So most of these people have come from all over the world. We all know that 83 nationalities, 173,000 terrorists came from all over the world to fight in Syria. And over the years, we have seen that the Syrian government was fighting until the Iranian, the Hezbollah, the Revolutionary Guards, or what we call them the Iraqi Hashd al-Sha'bi, the Popular Front, joined hand with the Syrian army, and they were fighting Daesh inside Syria. And these are the people who defeated Daesh. Anything you can tell you the United States did, then where did the fighter of the United States goes? I don't see any of these fighters being killed or shown, because we have more than 55,000 terrorists still under the American arms, custodied in the Kurdish area, northern eastern part of Syria. These are even till date, even acknowledged by the UN. And we had around 70,000 terrorists joining hand with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham in Raqqa, because when the Syrian army took Aleppo back from them, it was the Russian who intervened in Syria, and the Russian took part in the war against, not because the love of the Syrian government, for God's sake. The Russian, because they wanted to protect their own interest in Syria. This is one of the issues. Second part is to counter the Iranian influence in the region. 2015, Iran was very much influenced in part of Syria, Lebanon, Hamas, Palestine, because they were supporting the resistance forces. That's what they call it, the arch of resistance to that part of the world. So Syria were not allowed to enter into Idlib, because Turkey, which I used to call it the de facto Khalifa, he has already turned Turkey into Pakistan. The infrastructure of terrorist organization were already acknowledged by the Turkish government. They fully went into my country, and they fought in Iraq and Syria, we know. And that's the result what we are seeing now. So Julani, what did he learn throughout the years? He learned from Taliban why the world is against the Taliban. He learned from Iraq why people were against Daesh in Iraq. In Syria, he's coming with a new Islamic view. If you notice, there are ladies with him. If you notice in Syria, they're talking of a democracy, of bringing back the people into the fold, an anti-regime, dehumanizing the previous regime. All these stories has been floating in the air. But at the end of the day, it is the regime life has finished. The Syrian government life is ending because the big power decided so. So when the 7th October took place in Gaza, the war already started. Israel doctrine changed. The concept of security and defensive changed in the Israeli dictionary. So they said it's time to go fully aggressive against Syria, against the Hezbollah in Lebanon, and against the Palestinian. And they continue the same policy in the three cities, the three countries, and they destroyed totally Gaza Strip, annihilated, and 85% of the infrastructure is gone, 100% internal dismissal, and displacing the population. And in Lebanon, they have already done, and they have killed the leaders of Hezbollah. So the Syrian government, on their fault, since the victory of liberating Aleppo, the Syrian government did not do anything for the people. We were under American sanction. We were under a very harsh sanction on the Syrian people. And also the government being more corrupted, because the warlords of the Syrian government who fought alongside the Syrian government, they start joining hand with the government, with the businessmen against the public. So the public resentment was so much in my country. And if I used to get my salary $2,000 a month, my salary turned out to be $5 for the last 15 years. So imagine $5 salary to survive in a war zone, and that's how the people of Syria were facing the same music. So regime change was decided after Trump visited Northam, and he met with Zelensky, and he told him that we have to end the war. And I think Russia found a reason to give up Syria, to take Ukraine from the jaw of Trump. So Turkey came on the fold, told the Russian and the Iranian not to intervene. Now I'm going to tell you the interesting story which you don't see in the media. How did the Syrian regime fall? till the last minute, and I can go and record with you, till the last minute, President Assad was still sitting in the palace. He was promised by the Iranian that they will be attacking, because the movement, the Turkish gave the story to the Russian that we will only take the road, the highway, and we will go to Aleppo, and we will, blackmail the president to come to decide, to come to power, talk to us, talk to the Turkish president. He is refusing to talk. That was the objective, which is declared objective. Russians were taken for a ride. President Assad was in the palace. He was in a separate room. The security guard of the Russian took him at a gunpoint to Latakia. He was not run away. He was taken at a gunpoint by the Russian. And they took him to Latakia. From Latakia, they took him to Russia. Iranians were in Syria talking to President Assad. And the foreign minister went to Russia, and they told them that we are unable to bring troops by road because the American threatened the Iraqi not to allow them, let the Iranian pass through forces or the Iraqi Popular Front to come into Syria. So that was the question, difficulty. So what was the other option? Airlifting. Airlifting, the Russian telling the President Assad, we need the permission from the American and from the Israeli. They kept the delay tactic, so Damascus fall not by Julani. Damascus fall by Ahmad Awwad forces in the south, which they have taken over Damascus, and then the force joining the Syrian government fall. The rest is history. So how this regime changed, I feel sorry for my country. I feel bad. I always felt proud of being a Syrian, fighting for the cause, fighting for the people. But look where we are now. This is the new phase where they're allowing all this group to go into retribution, sectarian violence. You may be having lots of promise. If you leave Julani right now and listen to his talk, what he's saying, he's absolutely right. He's talking the truth. He's talking true Syrian. But will they allow him? I think they will allow him for 1 year. And this 1 year to kill the maximum number of minorities in Syria. And there where you will kill the maximum minorities of Syrian, you will be using the R2P to bring the international forces to occupy Syria and protect minorities. And that is the whole idea. They have done it in Yugoslavia, they have done it in Rwanda, and they wanted to repeat the same thing in Syria. So these are the issues which they are allowing. We have lots of stories, we have lots of reports. People are getting killed in Syria, and especially among the minorities. So I don't see any future for the current government if they don't stop the killing, A. B, if they don't come openly and talk of a national reconciliation to make Syria back and stand on their foot. Who is the sole benefit of this? I'm ending here. Is America, Israel, and Turkey. Turkey might feel at the moment that they have gained a lot. Definitely they gain a lot. But in my own opinion, strategically thinking, they will pay the price very soon. The disintegration of Turkey is very much on the card. Watch my word. Second part will be is Israel. Israel is taking full advantage now. And why Israel is occupying Suwaida, Qunaitara, Daraa, 62 kilometers. In one of my articles I have mentioned a few years ago, an American company found oil in the Golan, a Syrian-occupied Golan. And the tributary of these oil is 62 kilometers inside Syrian territories. So you have a pretext of fighting terrorists, of not believing that this terrorist group, whom you have been paying their salaries since 2013 by the Israeli government, which is acknowledged by their intelligence department, which is Netanyahu himself was visiting makeshift hospital in the Golan and shaking hand with them, and they were thanking him. They were better than the Jordanian, they were telling him, of protecting us and by treating us and sending us back to Syria. You have to pay back. Nobody give you free lunch. So Israel is taking full advantage of the current situation, destroyed the whole of Syrian army, the whole of infrastructure in 1 week. They said never in their history they could bomb so much of Syria. They totally destroyed. So Syria now is only with catapult, with the Kalashnikov. They can kill each other. Only people kill each other, but nobody can cause danger to Israel. Israel have the full right to protect itself. Nowhere about it. No doubt about it. Every country have the full right. But do you have the full right to occupy other people's territories? I don't think so. So I think perpetual violence for continuous war. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Awwad. There is no doubt that with the fall of Damascus, the last bastion of secularism in West Asia has fallen. Whether we like it or not, there is no doubt that Assad regime was definitely not representative or democratic, but it was definitely modern and secular. At least it was not a radicalized regime. So that's there. One more big lesson that I think people need to learn after Kabul and Damascus is that you can't mortgage your security to external powers. You have to defend your country yourselves. And I think that's been reiterated very clearly by these incidents. Very, very, very. We'll now open up for question and answers. And I have, let me give the first word to Ambassador Bhaswati Mukherjee and then Admiral Shekhar Sinha. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
We'll take 2-3 questions at one go.
Thank you very much, Alokji, and I'd like to congratulate the panel. One of the points which I wanted to ask, particularly my dear friend Waiel Awwadji, is that it would appear that the Middle East and particularly Syria has become the focal point of the great game. But there is one point which I'd like your views on, which is that the West looks at the Arab world through Western lenses. When the so-called Arab Spring happened, I was ambassador to Netherlands, and I remember the then Saudi ambassador telling me that the West doesn't understand that there is no spring in Arab lands. We go straight from summer to winter, winter to summer. So therefore, even the terminology Arab Spring came from a Western mind, no Arab was consulted. So under those circumstances, and given the tragic history that you have outlined for us, which is very moving, what do you think will be the ultimate result of this gross external interference because of economic reasons, oil, etc.? And you said that Turkey will eventually suffer, but will not Israel also suffer to some extent, is the question that I had for you. Because to live in a state of perpetual enmity with the neighbors around you is not the right path to development, in my perspective. Thank you.
Well, thank you all three speakers. I think you have really given a very good discourse of the entire happening. My question is quite short. Do you think the Saudis will use this time to tighten their grip on the Houthis in Yemen by strengthening the forces of the government? I have a feeling that this may happen. The Houthis will become further marginalized in Yemen. The second one, just passing mention, like Alok said, that you should not mortgage your security to external power. I think the European Union is learning its lessons right now. It's not very far. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My compliments also to all the panelists for the excellent presentations. My compliments to you also. I think you have added great value through your comments, initial comments and in between. So compliments to everyone who's sitting on the dais. I have two questions. One is to Dr. Ambassador Ausaf Sayeed. And that is, we've spoken about so many countries in the region, far beyond, etc. One country has not been mentioned by any of the speakers. That's India. Would you like to share your thoughts about, how is that region, the change that has taken place? And since you've been in that region, you understand it very well. What is the impact? How do we look at it? As I think Alok said, secular country. And of course, that is of interest to us. The second question is to Dr. Meena Singh Roy. And that is about, I think everyone has mentioned that Russia has, got diminished as a result of what has happened there. But of course, this region and the two bases, Latakia and Khartoum, they are very important for Russia. Do you think Russia is going to sort of just lie low and let it be? They might have made these initial, you mentioned about it, these initial moves to get into that region. But will they let it be just like that? Because this is, it was thought that these two bases are far too important for Russia and their exit really to the Mediterranean. Thank you.
I'll just ask the panelists to respond. You need not answer all the questions. You can just take whatever you feel like, starting with Waiel. Yeah.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your questions, and I'm happy to see you as always. The point is that when Obama, you remember when President Obama visited Cairo University, he delivered a speech. And even if we go back to his speech, we should go as an academicians to read what he was saying in that speech. And he wanted the change and transformation in the Arab world and democracy and all. There was the model of Turkey was promoted in the Arab world, that being an Islamic country, being a modern, it can be, and a moderate Islam. That's why you had lots of the parties in the Arab country, from Tunisia to Algeria, to every place on the north part, and then in Syria, where the Turkish influence was so much strong in that mind. So they were trying to promote political Islam, in fact. And that is where they started the story of this. So basically, Turkey has played the major role with the Muslim Brotherhood organization, that they wanted with the American administration. They wanted the change of the regime, especially the secular regimes. So this secular regime can be changed and replaced, because most of the allies of the United States, they were immediately to fall, whether it is Tunisia, Ali Zain al-Abidin, then you had also the Egyptian, Mubarak was removed, mostly of the American allies. But Syria was the country, everybody was asking why it left so long. I mean, they could take it. They can take it anytime, Syria. But there is a time to take every country and when to take it. So I think Israel is benefiting, no doubt about it, because they have a greater Israeli plan, and everybody now talking in the open, and even Netanyahu is the one who started. In fact, if you look at the war the American fought in the Middle East, it is only after Netanyahu, because Netanyahu suggested, promoted, and that you change the regime in Iraq, the West Asia will be peaceful, then change the regime in Iran, the country will be much, much better, change in Syria, change in Yemen, change in Egypt. All this was part of the Israelis' project. So we have an Israeli project, an American project, which is two parallel to each other, but they differ of the implementation. And we have the Turkish project, which is also there, but we never have an Arab project. So to blame it on external affairs, no doubt about it, but we have to blame ourselves. We are the Arabs who we blamed ourselves, because we never been able to transfer from a feudal society into a more, civilized or democratic setups of society, which is we have failed on those lines. But that is why they have promoted, and they knew our weakness is our religion and our not understanding religion, and that's why we are paying the price. I think Israel will not have a peaceful stay in this part of the world. Syria will not disintegrate. Syria will go into federation, because every group is now saying we want the Druze, because they feel that they were supporting the Druze, and the Kurd were also getting their support by the Israeli and the American, and also Turkey will not be allowed. And remember, strong Turkey in Europe, it never been the objective of European only. Leave it aside because of the greater power game.
Thank you for your question, Ambassador Sajjanat. I think, when we talk about Russia, there are many misperceptions. Russia has been weakened, but, there is one saying in North, Mara hua hathi bhi sawa lakh ka hota hai, that is one. And as far as the Syria is concerned, I think the Russians haven't given up. The Putin is directly talking to them. They are trying to rebuild as much as they can. And I think the surprise element would be what happens between Trump and Putin. What kind of a deal they actually, come up with, and who has to give what where. So that would be a surprise element. But I think the military bases for Russia are extremely important. They have withdrawn a little bit, but I don't think they are gone. And there is a certain acceptance also by, the HTS leader, Jolani, that they want to have peace with every major players. So they are at the moment needing every actor which is important in the region. But for me, the surprise deal could be coming up, with what kind of a deal or what kind of a negotiations happen between Putin and Trump. So that is where I will stop. I hope I've answered your question.
I would answer your question first, impact on India. Now, you see, I had an opportunity to visit Syria as secretary when I was working here, and that was a visit where we had not gone officially to Syria for several years. So when I went there was a tremendous response. The foreign minister and many ministers were there. And then, we were supporting them for various, aid in terms of Jaipur food, prosthetics, education. We were giving scholarships and many things. So one important aspect is that we always were politically neutral in the conflict. We never kind of said anything either way. So to that thing. But remember that of the various Islamic countries which have been either supporting India or at least remaining silent in OIC, one was Iraq, another one was Syria. So that was again there. So when I went there, so everybody said, why is India not helping us? Why are you taking these sanctions, very seriously? There are ways to work around, and one thing which they said is that Syria has a lot of phosphate reserves, and these phosphate reserves are one of the richest in the world in terms of the phosphorus content. So they said everybody is dealing with us through Dubai. You could also do it. So then, on our invitation, the Syrian foreign minister came. He brought in a big delegation, and in fact, a finance delegation also, who wanted to tell us, okay, how to do business while the sanction is still there. At the same time, they said that once the sanctions are lifted, India, we would like to give these, mining concessions to India. You can come in a big way. And our own companies had, experience of working there, ONGC, BHEL, many other things. So this was the big economic incentive which was there. So we took a decision after that, okay, the conversation with Syria has to go on. You cannot our embassy was again being run by a very junior officer. There was no ambassador. So we took a decision, and Honorable EM agreed to do that. So we appointed an ambassador, so that let us have a proper ambassador, so that, this is, we can't let. So there has been these engagements, and of course this was much before we anticipated that there will be a ton of events, but still the current Syria in the current regime will still hold significance to India, as was the other that economic a lot of work in the possible reconstruction phase when it begins, because our companies are already accustomed to working there. Then, our people have been visiting Syria. Especially, some of the Shia groups have been visiting there. So there has been people-to-people engagement also. Syrian students, study here. So we could capitalize on this goodwill and strengthen our, footprint there. And based on this, of course, the larger interests which we have, IMEC and many other interests which we are having, Syria's geographic location also, as Mr. Waiel said, it's very, very important. So this is there. So I think as a country, we should further strengthen our, relations with Syria, maybe perhaps invite the new foreign minister to come and continue the discussion which we had with the earlier regime. One point I wanted to just comment on your thing on Houthis. I served in Yemen. Houthis is very complicated. Yemen itself is a very complicated country as such. So if you remember, the former president Ali Abdullah Saleh had said it is like sitting on the head of a snake ruling Yemen. And he fought 6 wars with Houthis, and ultimately he was butchered by Houthis on the streets of Yemen. So his own allies. So this is very complicated. And again, although the Saudis and UAE, they came together in Yemen, but then their objectives started differing. They still differ. And it doesn't come out that much in public domain, but they have been moving in a different manner. Like, for example, UAE has virtually taken over the Socotra Islands. Then they have come, and started, making constructions in the Perim and all those places in the Bab al-Mandab. So I think it is not that easy to control Houthis. Imagine that was a time when I was serving, they were only localized in the southern province of northern province of Yemen, but south of Saudi, From then, dramatically, they spread all over. So obviously, there are different factors which are working there. But having said that, I think with Iran considerably weakened and now Syria more or less coming into the Sunni fold, I think the Houthis may come to terms and then have some kind of agreement with Saudis. If not an agreement, at least some understanding of not hitting the oil installations and others. But this is a complicated country, so there are no simple solutions.
Thank you. Next. Thank you. I think very often we tend to simplify Shia-Sunni conflict in terms of Shia-Sunnis, not realizing that Zaydis and Alawites have very serious doctrinal differences with Ithnai Sharias, who used to consider them as apostates at one upon a time. It's actually the global geopolitics which have pushed all Shias together now. It was not the case. General Hasnans. Yeah, please come.
Thank you, the panel. Excellent panel. My question to anyone, but perhaps to Ambassador Sayeed. In the entire environment of the Middle East, so many people under arms, so many non-state people, and none of these situations have come to a conclusion. The war in Gaza has not ended. The war in Lebanon has not ended. What you're seeing in Syria, it has not ended. Do you foresee that there is still scope of being surprised by the way we were surprised in 2014 with the arrival of the ISIS in a big way in northern Iraq and northern Syria? Because you see, there's still areas of Syria which are uncontrolled. And we are aware that the ISIS have been festering in some of those areas for a fairly long time. Their efforts of going international, going to South Sri Lanka, Philippines, and all that failed. They came back to Afghanistan and possibly are seeking avenues in the Middle East again. What do you think is the possibility of a return of not only ISIS but any terrorist organizations?
Okay, my take on this, General Adnan, is that you are right that there are so many factions which are still around there. They're all hibernating, waiting for some opportunity to come up. Now, although we publicly, the new Al-Shara is trying to kind of unify all of them, but then it is very difficult. The Kurds want their own independence. Turkey is wary of that. Even Kurdistan is split into 4 different countries, if not more. I visited Kurdistan also. There, again, the sentiment was, we are a different country. We want independence from Iraq. We want independence from there. We want all this thing. So one wouldn't know. Suppose if such a movement comes in. Now, if Iran, for some reason, if there is internal this thing, there could also be some kind of a trouble there. So, I mean, as I remarked in my opening statement, Middle East has been a country where lot of things, instability we have seen it, and every generation thinks that it will end, with its generation and there'll be hope for the next generation. Perhaps my father had dreamt of it. I am dreaming it. I have children and maybe having grandchildren. So I really don't know. This will be a very, very challenge, because Yemen itself is a huge problem. Of course, we know about the Houthis, but then more than the Houthis, there are also the militias who are controlling Hadramaut and other areas which are, under the UAE control. So we really don't know. There could be any possibility. So we should also be very vigilant, at least from the security aspect, all the experts which are there, that we should be on our guard, to maintain our own interests, and especially in the maritime security, ease of navigation and other things. So nothing could be ruled out as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you, sir. My question is to Mr. Walid. I was in your country where loading phosphate, as said, in one of my ships, and I saw the caption written on one of the quays, "We are the cradle of civilization." So from that standpoint, I want to draw your attention to one fact. Do you see a pattern with the fall of Iraq, fall of Libya, fall of let us say, other so-called popular regime like Assad, and what happens as an aftermath, and also fall of Afghanistan? They are in a war-ravaged state of affairs, overrun by stateless actors in an absolute messy state of affairs, while the regime change was only at a promise for a better future and a better tomorrow, like all this talk is going on. And this has been the cradle of serious instability and stateless actors. That's point number one. And if we draw a parallel to my country, you see all around us, there is fall of Myanmar, there is fall in Nepal, there is fall in Bangladesh, there is Sri Lanka. And what we can learn from you, seeing all this regime change operation and what will be the effect at the people at the center of it. And does it solve any problem per se? And do you also see this pattern with those kind of people like the strongmen who used to lead this had a call for United States of Arabia and anti-dollarization as the buzzword today goes, and with some of the new leaders being extremely averse to that. Do you see any pattern in that, sir? And what are the security implications? Thank you.
Yeah, at the back.
Good afternoon, good evening, sir. I would like you to throw some light. Is Arab Spring over or is Iran unfinished business?
Oh,
Since for the Americans, they're Arabs, but they are not really Arabs.
just
Thank you. I had a question particularly to Mr. Awwad, but also to the other panelists, about what's beginning to emerge. It has been already alluded to, what's beginning to emerge from the talks between Putin and Trump, in which there is a push towards a new, between them at least, bipolar world in which Russia is getting what it wants in Ukraine. The US is getting some economic benefits. As we know, it has already signed some agreements with the Ukrainian government for exploitation of mineral resources. And in the Middle East, Russia's interests are also protected. And Trump says we will protect Israel and take over Gaza because Israel cannot handle the situation. And that goes back to the original plan B, which you know about, not many people do, that the Ukraine problem was mostly created by the Israeli-American plan to create an Israel B, plan B, in case Israel became unlivable. A lot of Israelis could move to Ukraine. And so a sort of a new Israel, as Zelensky called it, was the Ukraine plan, which has now collapsed. So there will be some agreement about that. Thank you.
yeah. Next, last question. Next one.
Yeah. I've got a couple of questions. One,
Brief, please.
yeah, sure. The timing of this regime change seems to have happened just as the results in the US came by. Do we see some pattern here? Like what you said, Netanyahu is involved in many regime changes around. So is it that he was in a hurry, that he didn't want the uncertainty of Trump, and he did what he did? That is the first one. Second, ETA is quite deeply entrenched with HTS. So how do you see China, as a player there? Would they use the Turkey route, like Madam said, and try and come back, or ETA is going to be a strong player there? How is it going to work out? And last but not the least, we seem to be seeing a pattern in Trump where he seems to be leaving regional problems to regional leaders. Probably he's asking Modi ji to handle Indian subcontinent, and probably Benjamin Netanyahu to deal with West Asia. He is going to deal with China and probably other things. Do you see a pattern in that line?
Okay. I'll now request the panelists to respond, starting with Ambassador Ross.
I think I'm starting with this. I don't know whether it was a part of the design to kind of change the regime. I think it looks simplistic that way. But really everybody had thought, okay, why everything is happening together when Israel had the upper hand, in Gaza, when Israel, could, almost neutralize Hezbollah and then attack Iran, and Iran remained quiet. And suddenly, so it would all appearing that everything is kind of being stage managed to create a Middle East where nobody is in a position to question the Israel's authority and all. At the same time, of course, Trump had earlier tried to kind of mediate between through Abraham Accords between Arab countries and Israel. So kind of create a scene where, the Israel doesn't go unchallenged. I'm not too sure whether other questioner he asked about whether there was a plan B for Ukraine, for Israelis. But this certainly, there are too many, things, coincidences which are happening. But one wouldn't know. History would tell us, later whether there is any secret dossiers which are released in public domain. But I would say that this is indeed a situation where everybody tries to benefit. China in particular has, which had always in the Middle East tried to play a very large economic role because it is the biggest buyer of, the oil and other things, economic interests are there. But you saw it play as a mediator between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which was suddenly everybody realized that, okay, it is playing that role. It's not that kind of a role we couldn't have played. We could have also played as India as a country. But then after that role, it said that it can also mediate between Syria and Arabs and others. So, so we have to be, cautious of this. Perhaps our own policies, foreign policy doesn't allow us to play that kind of a proactive mediatory role. But then, we can always act as a bridge between various factions and, take care of those interests.
I think there are a lot of questions. I think one is United States of Arabia a possibility? I don't know who asked, but I think we are living in an era where there is, kind of an autism which we see with the countries. There are more minilaterals, there are more quadrilaterals, they are more, focused on their individual development. So this United, States of Arabia probably on paper or otherwise for something which is common to them, that might, but otherwise I don't see such a united, effort. We already have those kind of mechanisms which are in place. Maybe Mr. Awwad would say something. Is Arab Spring over? I think, Arab Spring, we generally in the research arena, we say there's been a political transition, So that is what it is. And today it is still on. I mean, when we talk about the political transition, when we talk about, internal unrest, when we talk about, the aspirations of the people, we also see, various efforts by the countries in the West Asian region, to come up with the plan B as far as their own people are concerned. On Russia's interests are protected in the Middle East, I think for now it is. They are working hard on it, and they're not going. They may be weakened at the moment, but I think I've answered it. Timing of the regime change, I think you've already answered it. China's role in the region, I think Chinese are very smart when it comes to the Middle East. Their core interest is what matters to them: infrastructure development, economic diplomacy. They will wait for the opportunity, and they would do it with the partners who, are going to be with them. I talked about that triangle. It's just I feel it might work out because of the, common interests. But they will continue, to follow the kind of a policy which they have done in Middle East. So they will sell their, strengths. They will invest where they can gain more. It would be more on infrastructure. As far as Syria is concerned, I don't think they are the major oil, buyers from the Syria. The Gulf matters to them. Regional actors to take charge of the region. I think it's a very, very difficult question. They would, as I said, it's a new dynamics which is unfolding in the region. We will see the regional actors coming together where it matters to them, but not collectively in a sense, with the united voice and force. That's what is my take. Thank you.
Thank you. I think every question is needing a special session for it, but I'll try to sum up the intelligence questions. In fact, Syria, thank you for reminding us of the cradle of civilization, because the eldest inhabited capital in the world is Damascus, and the oldest city in the world is Aleppo, which is Turkey claiming now it's a part of Turkey. Yes, that's they have been eyeing Aleppo for years. So this is one of the things, one of the reasons why Syria has been targeted, because it's a civilization. And I think there was an important question from Ambassador Sachar is also regarding India. What lesson, and I have noted this and I forgot to talk, what lesson India can learn from this? I think there are lots of lessons India has to learn from this. There are lots of patterns to draw for what happened in Bangladesh, what's happening in your neighboring world, because you're a victim of terrorism. Terrorism has been used as a tool to achieve political objective. They have succeeded in Afghanistan. They brought down the USSR. They took it to Iraq. They took them to Syria, to Libya. They are doing the same. So it is a fact that they continue to do so. And remember, which is very important, not that many people know, most of the terrorist organizations or the fundamentalist organizations is infiltrated by the maximum number of intelligence in the world. Every country have one factions fighting for them. That is why you saw Syria look like a pilgrimage. You could see that everyone came to Syria. I mean, when did we see in the last 15 years many of the foreign dignitaries coming to Syria? I tell you very frankly, everyone have support from one faction or the other, because most of these people have been sent by these foreigners into to train them using Islam as a religion. They have nothing to do with Islam. All these are terrorists. They will remain terrorists. Terrorist is a terrorist. There is no question, good or bad terrorist. So I think these are the pattern one has to listen. India can learn. And I have written an article which called from Kandahar to Suryastan, or another one to Shamistan. I think what India should worry is from Mauritania to Uyghur province. It is the region where they were going to use Islam as a tool to fight and to destabilize the region. And I think India is, like many other countries, has to fasten its belt to watch and be careful with the development coming up. These are issues one has to maintain. India did not do wrong by keeping good relation with any countries. This is international relation, Alok. This is understood. You can be with any regime. You can be with this regime. You can be with the next regime. It's an international relation. So don't blame India for not being or being good to this country or bad to this country. I think that's a wrong perception of many of the politicians, and I'm sorry to say that, using it to say anti-government. No, it has to be a policy. It is followed by all over the world. I think the Arab Spring never died. It will continue. What worries us now is Egypt, which is now they're going to be destabilized because Egypt refusing to accept Gaza people to stay there, so they have to pay the price. Jordanians are putting their hand on their head. Saudi Arabia, by the way, is also facing the music. But the moment what we are gathering the news is that everybody happy that Syria become the hub of all that terrorist group in the world. Let them be there. Let them kill the maximum majority of the Syrian, and then we will come and intervene, and we will be saving humanity.
Thank you, Waiel. I think it's been a fascinating discussion. I think there are a lot of lessons, not only for India, but for the globe at large. If we have to look for create a society that is resilient, secular, and that can withstand these impacts. I must, at the end, thank all of you for taking time out to be here with us. From next month onwards, we'll be reverting back to our original timing of 6 p.m. that we do. On 17th March, we have the first discussion on the geopolitics of tariff, trade and technology, which is on 17th March. And then we have thereafter a book discussion on Dr. Ram Madhav's book, One Nation, Our Nation, Our Constitution. So I hope all of you find time to come. I'll now request my colleague, Dr. Pawan Chaurasia, to come and conduct the felicitations. "17th is the geopolitics of technology, trade and tariff, and on 25th we have that book discussion on Dr. Ram Madhav's book, Our Constitution, Our Pride.